Welcome, welcome everyone to another episode of Owning Her Health. This is episode 18. Dr. Lisa Holland, PT, your host. Thank you so much for being here. This episode is one that might cause a trigger for a couple of you. So I am going to warn you. If there's some triggering going on, it's because it's still speaking with you. So I speak a lot on transformation, the subject of transformation, and not so much about how to transform, although I do get a bit into my journey in the beginning, moving myself in my career, making choices and moving myself from a masculinized view of my career into a more feminine flow, curvy hustle type of not always known exactly the next step, but allowing my intuition to tap in and letting things be a bit more flexible in how they are presented to me. After that, I do speak a bit about what helped me, and I put out a call really for you. This particular podcast, like I said, is to have you, the audience, who I so appreciate for your wisdom. I hope you know that. I hope that you know these chats are for you to see yourself in my guest, see yourself in my conversation, and realize you're not that far from there if you have something you're working on that has touched you. And what I'm asking for and discussing is a bit of my frustration as a women's health advocate and some things I'm working on and how you maybe can help me through you being who I want to serve, who I want to help. And so 12 or 13 minutes into it, I make a request of you, and I talk about a couple of key things that are on my theory of why it's so hard for people to transform and go really into transformation and sort of hit that wall. We do talk a bit about victimization, which is the area that may trigger. So I would love if you give me some feedback either on my Libsyn page in the show notes, which you can access through Dr. Lisa Holland PT Facebook or my LinkedIn, as well as when you subscribe, hopefully through iTunes. When you download that on a regular basis, please do also go on to the show notes over via my social media or getting a direct link on my website, drlisahollandpt.com, so that you can let me know and put some information on those show notes and tell me what you think about this episode, and if it triggered you, what your thoughts are, and if you really related to it, tell me some of your wisdom. So today's episode is sponsored by Audible. audibletrial.com/owningherhealth is your link, which will also be in the show notes for your 30-day free trial. My hope is that some of these chats really spark some interest in you to read more on entrepreneurial ideas or leadership, some strength finders things, maybe some guests who have written books, and that you see if they have a book on there, as well as some of the resources that I put in the show notes. So coming right up is another episode of Owning Her Health. Let's get started.
Welcome to this episode of Owning Her Health with your host, Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. Join Lisa as she starts the conversation on what it really takes to become a healthy, wealthy, and whole CEO of your life. Listen in to real talk by real lady leaders in all walks of life as they open up on personal health stories, wealth, career, and feminine abundant living. Learn how to grow by owning your body, expanding your mind, and aligning your soul with the purpose only you can pursue in this world. Happiness begins with owning her health right now.
Hey, everyone. Episode 18 of Owning Her Health coming at you now. So as you heard in the introduction, we're going to be talking transformation today. And this particular subject is something that I've been working through how to work as someone who works with other women to transform their lives. And it's difficult. It's difficult to be somebody who's a catalyst, who's somebody who's a fire starter. And I've always been that way in my clinical practice, in my person. I mean, that's just who I am. Thinking back to being very, very young. And obviously, I just brought that ideal meanness of wanting a certain lifestyle. My particular quest in going into entrepreneurism is I always was sort of an entrepreneur and doing things first and starting things that weren't there in the mindset, but coming in. So I always knew I was going to have my own business, but there was a very different vision of that. And it was a very masculine industry based vision. For those of you who don't know me, my background is orthopedics, sports medicine, real good solid first 12 years of my career, 10 in physical therapy, 2 as a certified athletic trainer and in training through my undergrad and then becoming a certified trainer. Went right through that route, becoming a PT, ATC, adding on personal training certification to work more into the fitness, which is where I'd come from, dance, movement, fitness, bringing it all together with this belief system that the more and more letters that I went out and hunted for, the more valid I would be to one day open that clinic. That was my idea. And in my head, originally, that idea did not really work well with women having babies. I mean, every woman I knew that was a physical therapist either didn't have kids, wasn't married, or was pregnant and had kids and then went and abbreviated their career either by going and working in the hospital on weekends while they were home with the kids and their husband was working in the week, or they worked evenings so they could be at home, or they did like an abbreviated cycle, but it definitely wasn't like a full time with the kid. And again, I came out of school early 90s, mid 90s. That's when I went to school and was studying all these things. And, 96 was my first year getting my paycheck as a physical therapist. And that just, so when I was forming where my career was going to go, it very much looked like where I wanted to go, to be like the head of this like big sports therapy clinic, was going to require me to do so in a way where I'd have to do that first before I had my kids and where my kids were little, because the way I wanted to parent was not going to fit into that. And so I created my, after about 10 years of realizing, hey, this track it just doesn't align with the way, and having my kids, earlier than I thought I was going to have them, not because they weren't planned, but because my mindset changed after I actually got married and realized what I wanted out of life. And so, my transformation, my personal transformation was hard. It was hard. It was hard going a certain route and having success to a lot of extent. I was first at Hofstra University to get them an athletic training student award. First at, I was nominated for an award of high achieving something leadership award for student physical therapists, at Hunter College, and award for best RA at Hofstra University, and all that. So this is something I went through high school, youth, everything, all of this, go gather, go get, go achieve, go climb, and the transformation of realizing that, my gosh, I guess I really want to be a mom in the sense of how do I actually am around my kids kind of mom, was hard for me. It was a real splash in the face and a transformation into my feminine, and that conflict between all I knew. I mean, I definitely wasn't someone who you'd say didn't seem like, a girl, a woman. I mean, I wore makeup and I not that defines a woman, but I mean, there's some women that are more into the more feminine type of styling of, pinks and flowy, flowery dresses, and there's some that stay a little bit more A-line and more simple. I was on the side that kind of, played with it, and I was a little bit edge of sporty and, things like that. So it was, I get it. What I'm saying this whole story for is that I get it. Transformation is hard. It wasn't really pretty. That's not the topic of this podcast. And one day I will speak to that, but it was necessary. And so it just naturally became something that I saw so helpful. And when you see the light, when you're studying all this yoga, when you're studying all this self-reflection, when you're on that path to enlightenment, you start really realizing what they say. that a lot of this world is BS. And a lot of the things we do for validation is BS. And so, of course, I, in being that way, started attracting clients for physical therapy. And when I went off and became the belly guru, and I finally just said, you know what, I'm not going to just have this thing on the side. I'm going to actually own it and believe in it enough as a new way to treat women in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a yoga-centric, holistic wellness model as a physical therapist, as a women's health, fitness, holistic fitness coach of some way. When I finally realized I had transformed to some extent into something, I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay playing those other roles. I needed to quit the hospital, even though I was per diem, but I was going pretty consistently. I needed to quit allopathic Western model surrounding before I could really give to my more functional, ideal, holistic, blends of Ayurveda at that time, a more Eastern Western mix. I couldn't play both roles because it was so drastic. It was so drastic that when I was at the hospital, the mindset that was going to be accepted and when I would, and how that wouldn't work when I was in my own center, I didn't want to bring it in. It's not that that's all horrible. It's just not the mindset, the philosophy, the energy that I wanted. And I realized I couldn't do both. And there's hell of a lot of people who are living their life that way. It's not just about their career. It's literally about their life, and they feel it. And it may come out as chronic pain, chronic inflammation in some level of their body, because they're somebody who has been ignoring their body usually. They're people who have been ignoring that they're not feeling good in the life they're living. So those people who ignore that long enough, they usually don't stop until they can't live that lie anymore. And then it might be a marriage breakup, a death in the family, a death of their career, a loss of a job, something that really shakes them up to their core. But if they find someone, if they can find inspiration, whether it be their God, their guide, their friend, their spiritual books, their yoga practice, their walks in the woods, whatever, if they can connect, and each of those connections, if they can admit that it's no longer thy will, my will be done, and actually really admit it's thy, like saying that, thy will be done. And I don't care what religion you come from, the idea of that, you have that in somewhere ingrained in you, that there's this seeking, and when they can no longer deny it, things happen. Sometimes it's completely out of, it just gets shook up. Okay? It gets shaken. The kids say shook. I have a 17-year-old. She says shook, so that's why I said it. It gets shaken up, and it gets thrown in your face. So why am I bringing that up? Where's my frustration as a health provider, as a women's health advocate? Well, my frustration happens, and what I would love if those of you listening to this could explain to me how I could best serve you, the ones at the cusp. I know enough now. I've spent enough years climbing that ladder of my own personal development to realize I am no longer for the woman who wants to stay in her victim role. And that may trigger some of you, and I'm sorry for that. But it's important, and I hope you would respect me as I respect you as a woman. That is fine. You're there. I was there. I was there for years. I was angry. I felt I deserved way better than the chaos I was brought up in. And it propelled me, and it got me out of, maybe one path that I would have been miserable in, which, by the way, wasn't a destitute path. It was a destitute path. It was actually to be an orthopedic surgeon, and I'm pretty sure it would have been a damn good one. But I probably would be divorced right now, or never have gotten married, and I definitely wouldn't have the kids and be living how I'm living right now, a very freedom lifestyle, because it would have just been too many stakes in the fire, too much I had gone into that money-wise, and and effort-wise, and I just wouldn't have probably made some choices that I made. Not that I didn't make them the other way, but I gave myself a different freedom. And what I'm getting at is that I get it. I get how you want to be there, and I'm not disrespecting you. And all I'm saying is I ask you to respect your sister and me back, to say that some of us have put that away. We have put it away and have owned our circumstance. And while we may have been a victim at one time, we decide no longer to define ourselves that way. And you can no longer be in a circumstance as your problem that cannot be fixed, as the reason why you're so miserable, as the reason why you are poor, or as the reason why you are being treated a certain way. You can no longer have that be the reason why tomorrow will be like that, unless you decide that you remain a victim. But as soon as you say, I am a survivor, I am a thriver, I am someone who used to be a victim, as soon as you say that, you shift. And that's called transformation. And that's the stuff I'm talking about. So I get it. But what I don't get now is when I see people who spend a lot of money on things that want to sell you transformation. So that woman who goes off on that yoga retreat, or that person who, does quit their job and get another job because they're just like, I need something different, or does leave their husband and goes off and does another relationship and spends years with that person. And yet I see them, the same things, the same types of posts on Facebook, the same comments, the same cycles going on in their life. And they've started a new studies, or they've started a new, moved away. And it's like they want transformation and they're paying a lot of money for it. But then when they meet someone like me, who, by the way, they're attracted to, I really don't advertise and I put things out there because I want to start conversations, and I do want some things that I do really want to help people on. I want you to know about, and you're not going to know about it unless you probably know me or something that I'm doing, or me advertising. But, I guess it just seems that my students come. The women who are ready for me do come, and I help them. But there's this other level that I really am reaching out in, and that's why I'm doing it video and audio, this podcast number 18, because I will connect to some people more visually versus auditory. I want to know if you would help me out and give me some feedback as to why someone, if that's you, does that. Why do you invest only to a point? Do you hit a glass ceiling that is yours? Is it subconscious? Do you get to a point where you're seeing? Because I have a theory, and I'm just wondering if that theory is correct. Because ultimately, if you want change, that means you need to be, one, willing to let go of what is. And so that's one of my theories. Are you so afraid to let go of what is? And again, I get it. Because right now, every single time you level up, you're going to have to go through that same birth experience, that same gestational crap, which, by the way, is crap. It's not happy-go-lucky when you were in your mother's womb. But being so, you've done it. You just can't call back and talk to that girl right now, or guy. You can't go back, but hypnosis maybe, if you believe it. There's some people that can't even do that because they have a wall and they say you can't. You can't go back to that time and there's no consciousness. You can't go in. I get it. You put that, but do you see where we set up our own walls on transformation? What if you just saw and just, instead of saying, I will never go get hypnotized and go there and see what comes out of it, I will, and I'll explore it myself. What if you didn't stop at, well, studies don't show that that's a valid thing and whatever, and so therefore I will not. You don't go explore it for yourself, which would be your truth, right? Because that's the ultimate thing. You can't just go buy a book. You can't just go buy a book, which is my second thought. If you're not scared to let go, is it that you're so much wanting it to be external and in a book and logical and like make sense to you first? That unless it makes logic, complete logic to you, you refuse to believe it's a possibility and therefore you can never have it? Because the reality is like I was just saying with the hypnosis, you could actually really know if all of those research things are valid in your life by experiencing it. And I think you don't because you're scared. Because you're scared. I get it. I'm scared to be hypnotized, right? You got to trust the person. You got to, they say you can't be hypnotized unless you're really willing. And if I'm going to go do that to like deeply explore something, I want to get my money's worth. I want to be deeply willing. So I have to let go of that. I have to feel like that trusted person. I don't know enough hypnotists. I got to start talking to hypnotists. I have to start knowing them as people. I got to know how they studied and their passion for it. And the same way somebody has to come to me as a physical therapist, because believe it or not, that feels foreign to them too and scary to them too. Even though there's more research studies that Harvard works with or something like that. But there's like Harvard psychologists that work with hypnosis too. You got to go meet them. So that's my question. Is transformation scary for you? Because, you put that ceiling in. Is there fear? That you'll do things that other people did. Going on a retreat is great because you saw Janie went on it and you're going to be there with 10 other people and you can all kind of have a shared experience. It won't actually be just your experience. And so therefore you can kind of like step back from whatever stuff's coming up, because it just seems to me that people just really don't want to change. And again, I get it. And the reason I say it is because I was one of those people who was unconscious to that. I kept wanting change, but there was things about my personality and ways that I worked or decided needed to be in order to have something else. For example, that very linear, masculine world view of success in my mind, having my own clinic and how that would work. That would work if I was never going to be the one that was pregnant. If I was going to be able to have kids, that original view would work if I was never going to be out on maternity leave for a couple months. Or because I didn't want to have my business like at 4, I didn't want to like have the clinic and not have kids till 40. Because I had a clear thought in my mind that I want to be like out into that next phase of life in my 50s. I don't want to be too old before I'm like, how is it living when the kids are adults, young adults? Not necessarily wanting to be a grandparent, but I did want to know how it is living where you have grown parents and you've moved from mothering to that matriarch role, which is another leveling up, right? Which is where I've worked these past 3 years on. Which is where I gave away all those things I collected and I transformed, and it wasn't easy. And it's so not easy. I'm asking this and I'm having this conversation with you to just get that thought going and wondering and wondering where you are and what you think about it. Because again, I have my points of view. But in working as a transformational coach at this point, and that has changed, changing people's lives. I did it in some ways in a very abbreviated body-centric space early on in my career. Oh, you got me back on the field. Oh, you changed my life of being injured to a life that I can go back to what I'm doing. But then it grew with my own yogic practices and my own spirituality and understanding a bigger role. And to be perfectly honest, as woo as it sounds, I could start seeing stuff in people better. I was able to start seeing where their energy was. I was starting to be able to see them at a biopsychosocial experience evaluation level. And I could see where their pain was being held at other levels, their emotional body. And, I could work with other practitioners, and it just naturally, we ended up working with certain practitioners in a team sort of way that thought like me, where there wasn't a barrier between mind, body, and to some extent their spirit, their essence, their core, that thing that is you from the moment. Again, I'm going to put some triggers of conception, the thing that propels you to keep going, because not all embryos keep going, right? Again, going to trigger some people. That's just the body, right? That's just your genetic code. Just going to throw epigenetics out there. We're learning a lot. There's a lot of will and there's a lot of consciousness that's going on before you have formed arms and legs. Just throwing it out there. Go do the research. Go look at in utero on gaia.com, gaia.com. And a lot of scientific people with lots of degrees in validation and research and things like that going into pre-born consciousness. So transformation is something we're always doing from the time we're a sperm and an egg coming together and being one giant cell and splitting and becoming something more to now. And I'm really, really starting that conversation. Not starting it, it's out there amongst my crowds, but I'm starting it with you and wanting to hear back from you. So my hope is that in putting it on the YouTube and putting it, of course, in my Libsyn page show notes, which if you're on LinkedIn with me, following me, you'll see it posted up on my LinkedIn as well as my Facebook automatically, Dr. Lisa Holland PT. On Facebook, that'll have the Libsyn show notes. And in those show notes, you'll be able to get my sponsors link, which by the way is Audible, this episode, audible.com. That's where you can get all those great books. Listen to them on the road, because the one thing that transformational living or change needs is you to be up to date with options. So audible.com has like thousands and thousands of audiobooks on there. And I have a link on there that you can get 30 days free and a free book that you get to keep. So you can get that. I will put on there, hoping you'll have that conversation with me, those comments back. Give me your thoughts. I want your wisdom. I want your goddess wisdom. I can come out here and just talk to you, but I'm hoping that I'm getting you to at least journal or to ask those questions amongst yourself. How could I bring transformation more easy into my life? How can I do that? How have you done that? How have you made changes that were big, radical changes? For example, I will see a woman that maybe has moved 3 or 4 times, changing her kids' schools, the environment, different seasons of the year influence, all because her husband got a different job. And yet when I say, let's transform now your body, or your lifestyle, like your stress style, the things you need to do, they're so hooked on that chaos, because it was chaos doing that when they're settled, they're not comfortable. They're sitting on the couch, having prayed for months that it would just like calm down, or having told everybody, when I get to Texas and things are settled, we'll chat, we'll have tea. And then it never happens, because things are never settled, because that they don't do the transformation. And I know that's hard to understand, how that's different from change, because change is always happening and you have to react, and that's life. But it's different, because personal transformation is yours. It's not for other people. It's not you dealing with other people's changes and making the best of it and making grounding from that and doing that. This is you. This is you ripping into your own nut shell. This is you bringing forth your own embryo, your own life. This is you digging down into your own roots, which makes it super scary, which is why it's so transformational, right? It makes it super scary because you really can't blame. You really can't blame. You can also not ignore the feelings that come up. And you can go divert yourself into somebody else's chaos, something else that happened and something you have to do for someone else instead of face it. You can go into your phone when you're sitting there quietly. That's one thing I want everybody to do, to kind of get a feel of what I'm talking about, embody what I'm talking about here. Because I know that when you're listening to the podcast, it can seem like some ideas and maybe even a little woo-woo and some conceptual, visual kind of things. But the way to bring it home is, I want you to notice how many times you go and grab for your phone when you're someplace alone and you think other people are sort of like judging you or wondering why you're alone. They're not wondering why you're alone. You're wondering why you're alone for a moment. And there may be a very good reason, like you were going someplace on the train and nobody else wanted to go or whatever. But maybe there's unresolved. You're unresolved about that. Maybe you really wanted your husband or wife to go, or your girlfriend or your daughter or son, or maybe there was chaos before you left and you have to settle that down. And it becomes self-soothing. I mean, scanning yourself on your phone now for a half hour is just another form of you when you used to suck your thumb. Grabbing for a bottle of wine or getting a glass of wine immediately when you go to a friend's house for a get-together is just the same as when you would run up to your mom or dad and kind of hang out with them a little bit till you felt safe enough to go off on your own in the party. And so if we want to get rid of those patterns, if we want to really emerge and step up our game, because that's what transformation is. Transformation is really, it's really easy when you're stepping back into old habits that you let go of. They don't feel like transformation. They don't feel like change. Yet everyone who knows when they went and did an exercise routine really well and were motivated and lost 10, 15 pounds, or really worked at changing their life and they moved and they got a new marriage and you know what that was. And when all of a sudden you're back with those 10 pounds and you're just as stressed as you were at that last job that you swore was the job, not actually you. It's really uncomfortable because you didn't even, right? It was like effortless. Well, what I'm saying is that if you're with the right guide, if you're with the right support system, if you've prepared yourself, if you're willing, if you're truly willing, going the other way can be that ease as well. Because there was stress there that it's just when it's something new, it's uncomfortable. And as long as you accept it's going to be uncomfortable when it's something new, then that's the only difference between when you transform back and you transform forward. So that's it. That's the end of this goddess chat, really, in terms of my part of it, my part of the conversation. The next part of conversation is up to you. And what are your struggles with transforming? Do you even understand transforming? Do we understand what it means to transform our lives? What it means to let go and let that old no longer be? Because there are things we kind of like and are comfortable in. I get it. But will the nectar of that new choice bloom be worth it? I say yes. I say yes because you keep going back towards wanting it, towards getting it. And people who don't and who stay stagnant seem to not be comfortable very long. And I'm not saying not to be calm, but there is a way, and it's hard to explain, where you are open to change and things flowing in and out of your life, and it still be calm. And I want that for you. So let me know, either in the comments on the YouTube, over at my YouTube, which will be in the show notes, or you can look up Lisa Holland PT. You'll probably see some yoga videos. You'll see some things talking, some former podcasts I did. I think episode 4 and 2 is on there. Brianne Grogan is on there. She had great stuff on Femfusion Fitness. And I had talking with Cynthia Luther, who was a stay-at-home mom who's kind of at 50 said, now's my time. And I will put on some of these links for things for you to comment on in the show notes so that you can get on the YouTube, as well as my Facebook, and let me know, or my LinkedIn, and let me know, because you guys are out there on that. I know you are, because I'm over there, and we are one and the same in the terms of balancing that curvy hustle. And I will see you real soon. Thanks for being part of the show.
Thank you for listening into this episode of Owning Her Health with Dr. Lisa Holland, PT. To learn more about her personal and professional development service, visit her online at drlisahollandpt.com.